100. In this slideshow, we will be discussing books, how they exist as a mass medium, and how they affect us. Presented by myself, Caitlin Phillips. Before we get into the lesson, I would like to ask you a few questions. Firstly, what memories do you have of books? Where do you think they came from? What lessons have you learned from books? And as media devices, how do they impact our modern lives? After thinking about them for a bit, you begin to realize the effect that books might have had on your psyche. Where do you get these ideas about books? Did you realize you thought that way? Did you assume how, when, or why they were created? Maybe yes, maybe not. But they are important questions and thoughts to consider before moving on to the introduction of our topic, the book. Using these questions to guide you, let us continue. Alright, a brief introduction to the book. As you know, over the last few years, the media market has become completely saturated with technology. After the rise of the internet, more and more people have become reliant on electronic entertainment. Books have become obsolete, with many young adults, mature adults, and even children beginning to rely more heavily on a TV show or a screen than picking up a book. But what about our roots? Where did books come from? It's time to delve into one of the most ancient and well-known aspects of media. In this lesson, we will cover the history of books, book formats, publishing trends, the rise and fall of books, pros and cons of books, how they make profit, and more. So, an early history of the book. The first versions of books date back to 3000 BC, and they were written on any surface Egyptians could get their hands on. Metal, bone, leather, clay, stone, you name it. With the continuation of written language, the ancient Egyptians began to write on papyrus. Using reed pens, they would write on papyrus scrolls, which were sheets of papyrus dried out and sewn together to create an early version of paper. By the 6th century BCE, papyrus dominated the economy and had the Greeks and Romans vying for papyrus to add to their personal and scholarly libraries. Once parchment came into existence, the Romans sewed pieces of papyrus and parchment together and bound them with covers to create an early form of book called a codex. This was the preferred form of early Christian and religious texts and completely changed the game for all written language. The next innovation began in the Tang dynasty in China in 700 CE. They began woodblock printing, which involved carving pages into wood and using ink to press the letters into the paper, similar to a stamp. In 1448, Johannes Gutenberg created the mechanical moving type. This revolutionized the bookmaking process and boosted the mass productions of books forever. Using this process during the Renaissance, they used the type to create and distribute mass quantities of the Bible quickly and efficiently. So, thought revolution. While we can note the importance of technical cornerstones, it is all the more vital to begin conversation about how thought was revolutionized. Books allowed movement of speech freedom and allowed for the very beginning of history. How else would we know how ancient civilizations progressed? There would be no collection to show us how they behaved. Writing throughout history has recorded generation after generation, century after century, civilization after civilization. We would be blind to the lives of ancient peoples without the knowledge that they passed down to us through their writing. We would be nowhere and unable to adapt academically without books. Without the recordings of scientific findings, we would be utterly unable to progress as a scientific and technological society. This is the crux of the formation and institution of all man's progress. As such, it is important to note the effect that writing has had on both religion as well as Enlightenment thought. No book has had such a profound effect on the world's psyche as religious text. The entirety of human existence has been dominated by religion. Entire peoples have gone to war over religion or advocated for peace. No such writing has had such an effect on civilization as the Bible itself. Starting with the beginning of printing presses and parchment, Man has been vying to pen down the thoughts of ancient religion, specifically Christianity. Books have turned writing into something unmoving and hard to spread to something that can be passed down and read indefinitely. Entire civilizations have relied completely on the text of the Bible, as well as other religious texts. Religion has dominated the ancient and modern world and has been made to do so by the creation of books. With the ancient kings, queens, and leaders of civilizations, the masses have been made to think only of religion and not of any other opposing thought. One would put their life on the line to spread differing opinions from that of the ancient religious texts. With the addition of books, people can pass along their thoughts without concern of being maimed, killed, or jailed. Nowadays, with social media, one can post anything they want, and the only punishment they would receive is potentially a ban. Enlightenment thought came about during the Renaissance in the 17th and 18th century. This revolution sparked mankind's maturity and began individual liberty, religious tolerance, and improved their own human condition. This would have been made impossible without books, which were the conduit to spread information at will, quickly, efficiently, and worldwide. Improvement of the human condition and enlightenment thought would be impossible without books. People would not be able to build off another's opinions, their thoughts would not be recorded, and the risk was much lighter to spread controversial opinions. While the technical importance of books is vital, it is just as, if not more important, to discuss how books began the revolution of thought and brought mankind into the forefront of self-improvement and consciousness. So, moving on to the modern history of books, this was marked by the so-called Gutenberg Revolution and allowed for the swifter spread of ideas. Because books were able to be distributed much more quickly than before, written texts and scholarly books were spread far and wide. Because of the accessibility, many women found literacy because of the ease of access and the new books gave them. Everyone benefited from the mechanical moving type, and more people became literate. Publishing companies were created to help authors distribute works. With the addition of new kinds of technology, it only makes sense that people would try to capitalize on it. Rather modern, publishing houses allow authors to make and distribute their work in a well put together way and establish connections they would not have otherwise had. Copyright is also a modern invention, and it was created to protect authors. Previously, any work could be called one's own, and there was no way to stake your claim on your own writing. Nowadays, this right is protected by many U.S. laws. After the Revolutionary War, Americans were in need of a pick-me-up. This resulted in rising popularity of new kinds of books, mainly including themes of freedom and saving women from peril. This helped to raise spirits after the war and give hope where hope was needed to the American people. So, advertising, PR, and bookselling trends. During blockbuster syndrome, publishers focus on high-promise books. Think Marvel or movies with popular actors. You know what will sell, they're blockbusters. During this, many publishers choose to ignore authors with promise and instead choose tried and true authors or book premises that have a high potential to be a cash cow. This doesn't have to mean good writing, as the publishers don't care about the quality if they know people are vying to get their foot in the door to read it in the first place. This causes many authors to turn towards independent publishing and forgo traditional publishing houses. In the 1990s, books began to move from bookstores only to larger supermarkets. These superstores were more favorable to book readers, as there was a larger selection, fancier atmosphere, lower prices, and ease of access. This led bookstores to compete with each other to be cheaper than these superstores, just to get their books to get off the shelves. Every stock-up purchase by the bookstores was a race to lose money, as they competed to have the lowest prices. This only fueled blockbuster syndrome, as books weren't even the primary product of these superstores. They only needed to sell a few blockbuster books to make a profit off of them. Stores with large popularity like Walmart and Target can strike deals with publishing companies to only carry books from their publisher. This is a win-win for both parties, except for when third-party booksellers are unable to strike deals or carry any books on their shelves. This leads to a lot of economic competitiveness as bookstores try to strike up deals and connections with publishing companies and usually fail. As you know, we have covered many media effects theories in this class. One of the media effects theories that coincides with my medium is symbolic interactionism. The symbolic interactionism theory is a theory that oneself is derived from others in the way we act with them. This interaction can be through many forms, in this case, books. These conduits for interaction can include many things and are instrumental to defining one's sense of self. Because people assign meaning to many objects, it makes sense that people can communicate through them. Think of textbooks, gifts, material objects, or even educational books. They're a constantly evolving medium that demonstrates human understanding and development. It only makes sense that books, and the way we develop them, can also develop us. The second media effects theory that coincides with books is the media logic theory. The media logic theory states that media can affect real-world events and shape social interactions. Media logic shapes the way that people communicate. Because people communicate through stories, logic, and books, it makes sense that they would change how we interact with the world. If you learn lessons through books, you will present those lessons throughout your life. These important life lessons are vital to the development of human culture, interaction, and sociology. So, how do books positively affect us? What are the pros? Firstly, books can help ease stress. Reading lowers heart rate, eases tension in your muscles, and can reduce stress by up to 68%. Additionally, books allow us to escape stress and transport us mentally. These pros can help those who are suffering mentally or simply want an escape from their lives. Secondly, books can improve brain function. By reading, you activate your left temporal cortex, which is a section of the brain that understands language, learning, and remembering verbal information. Studies show that by reading every day, there is enhanced connectivity over long periods of time. Books are also reliable and long-lasting ways to communicate information. Since books are accessible from almost everywhere, they are the perfect portable companion. Additionally, they require more editing and reviews than the newer alternatives like articles on the internet. Where anyone can post anything on the internet, books are more reliable in that they require more data and evidence to be published. Lastly, books are tried and true ways to write down information and share it. They have long been used as literary devices to educate scholars and pass down knowledge and stories. They have more than earned their stay, as they allowed society to grow and pass known knowledge through generations and centuries. They're a foolproof method to gather information and research for projects in personal growth, development, and learning. How about the cons? Firstly, unfortunately, they are not the best medium for time management. Books lack a search function like most other alternatives and have less concise information. Most books come as encyclopedias online and have books on general topics. Online, it is easy to find niche articles about whatever it is you are looking for. Also, books aren't as budget friendly. They usually cost money unless you go to a library. The alternative is usually free, whereas books, specifically hardcover, are going to be more costly. This even includes ebooks, which are still online. Next, books are a rather unsustainable option. Books cost time, materials, and money to produce, whereas online alternatives take up no waste and can be published by just one person. Paper, once discarded, takes up lots of space in landfills and actually makes up as much as 25% of the waste in dumps. So, how do books make money? How do those involved in bookmaking get their share? Well, publishers make money directly from bookstore sales. Once books are put up at bookstores to be sold, it is up to the will of the consumer to buy them. Publishers get cuts of the money sold from the books made to take for themselves. The way they go about owning a book is as follows. First, they read pitches from agents. These are employees hired directly by authors to pitch their book ideas to publishing houses. If a company or house likes the agent's pitch, they may request more information from the author and proceed to make deals with them. They will discuss royalties, deadlines, and other important information. Once the conclusion is agreed upon, the books will be put onto shelves. All major publishing companies have connections with bookstores, and the larger a company is, the more connections they will have. A publishing house can dominate many retailers and have many of their books put directly onto the shelves. So, how do authors make money? They make money from these royalties. Just like how publishing houses get cuts of money from the books sold, so do the authors. They go about making their money like this. First, they hire an agent to connect them to a publishing house and pitch their ideas for them. They will send out their manuscript, first chapters, etc., to the houses if requested, and finalize the contract. So, let's compare. Publishing houses make profits directly and get cuts from the books sold. They rely on connections from authors and booksellers to make their money and have job security. They are the middleman. Authors make profits off of royalties and contracts with their select publishing house. They rely on connections with publishing houses and agents, and because they rely on each other to make money, it only makes sense that both publishing houses and authors would have some financial similarities. They both make their profits proportional to the amount of books sold and don't make any profit if no books are sold. Allow us to move on to the book and popular culture. One of the first examples of books impacting popular culture is the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. This book is an anti-slavery novel that helped kickstart the American Civil War. This book established the American voice and was one of the first of its kind to distinguish Americans with their own voice. It solidified Americans as thinkers of politics, satire, the natural world, and dialectical idioms, which was a cornerstone in the development of U.S. popular culture and the way Americans communicate with their world. Next up, books in the 20th century expansion. At the turn of the 20th century, paperback books increased the spread of pulp fiction novels. As previously mentioned, paperbacks allowed for the widespread knowledge of books to be spread. This included fictitious books as well. Fictional books began their takeover as books began expanding into the pulp fiction realm. This led to increased popularity of children's books, including mystery, romance, and science fiction. As these kinds of media expand, so will the public's tolerance of taboo subjects. As books began to spread, they also increased in their obscenity and multiplicity of voice. With more voices, the line will be towed, and people will test the boundaries of this media. Now, in these times, we have seen an exponential increase in novel franchises' popularity. With the new culminations of different movements, there have been even more breakthroughs in free speech freedom exercise. As with actions, these ideals have begun to spread onto paper as popular culture in today's society has flipped the script. Now, books are beginning to adapt to the American populace. The beginning of the end. Nowadays, less than 50% of the U.S. population reads literature. There has been a 10% decline in literature reading and counting. In the last 10 years, we have seen exponential loss of reading, resulting in a loss of 20 million potential readers. Not only to the general U.S. population, but also for young adults. There has been a decline in the trends of young adults reading literature. Once the most likely to read literature, they are now the least likely to pick up a literary work of any kind, except in classrooms. The loss and decline of these habits is 55% greater in proportion to adults. They are losing their propensity to further their reading knowledge in much greater proportions than adults are. Not only this, but there is also a connection between loss of book reading and lack of social activism. Studies done by the NEA demonstrate that with the decline of literary participation, there is a decrease of social and cultural participation as well. Those that read literature are more likely to participate in community, cultural, social, and civic activities. By extension, lowered reading rates also result in lower participation in many important activities. In light of these upsetting findings, it is also important to note that there has been an increase in various other media forms. It has been shown that non-readers fill their time with other activities, such as television and other electronic pastimes. Additionally, electronic spending has increased by 24%. More people are spending money online than with other purchases, which is also concerning. With the use of various other media on the rise, it is important to see the implications of these trends. So, my final thoughts. With technology on the rise, it is difficult to predict how books will withstand the ever-changing demands of our society. It is impossible to ignore the instant gratification and knowledge that technology bestows upon us, and it is also difficult to say farewell to the historical format of books and welcome the cultural impoverishment that the loss of such media has set into place. Upon completion of this lesson, it is my hope that the impression of importance that books bestow as conduits of human knowledge and distribution are not lost on deaf ears. It is impossible to speak about the history of the world without mentioning the catalyst for its state of being. Creating this lesson has taught me many things about books and given me multiple insights into the realm of written language. I leave it up to the audience to proceed with their new knowledge and no longer take literacy and its benefits for granted.